Everyone has been told the same thing. Keep your home open. Let people in. That is what family means. That is what community means. That is the mark of a generous soul. And for generations, good people have held that belief, have kept that door wide open with pride, and have watched their financial lives slowly, quietly, almost invisibly drain away. Not because they lacked faith, not because they lacked effort, because no one ever taught them the distinction that the ancient wisdom has preserved for over 3,000 years. There is a sacred difference between the open heart and the unguarded threshold. Confusing those two things has cost more families more prosperity than almost any financial mistake I have seen in 35 years of teaching. I am Rabbi Naomi, and I have spent over 3 decades inside the ancient texts, the Talmud, the Zohar, the writings of the sages who built communities that survived exile, persecution, and economic collapse across centuries. What those texts describe is not what most people have been taught about who belongs inside the walls of their home. The tradition does not say, open your home to everyone. The tradition says, guard your threshold with wisdom. Because your home is not just a building. It is the spiritual ground from which your financial life grows. It is the vessel through which abundance either flows or is quietly redirected away from you. And there are 3 specific types of people. People you likely know, people you may love deeply, who every time they enter your home with regularity, draw something essential out of it. Not with malice, not with awareness, but with a consistency and a precision that the ancient teachers documented in extraordinary detail. I am going to show you all 3 types today, and I need you to stay with me through every single one. Do not stop at the first. Do not step away after the second. These are not 3 separate lessons. They are 3 legs of the same table, and a table with 2 legs does not stand. Before we go further, I want you to type the words, I am guarding my gate, in the comments right now. Not when the video ends, now, before we begin. Because the act of declaring publicly what you intend to protect is itself an ancient spiritual technology. The sages called it Kiyum Hadavar, the confirmation of a thing before it fully exists. And they taught that what you commit to in speech and in writing, you are far more likely to protect in action. Type those words, then come back to me. Most people, when their finances stagnate, reach immediately for the outside. They build a tighter budget. They add an income stream. They read a new book, follow a new system, reset their morning. And I want to say this with tenderness, because the people doing these things are sincere. They are working. They are trying. But what they are doing is the equivalent of repainting the wall when the pipe behind it is still leaking. The water is still moving. You have simply made the damage harder to see. What the ancient teachers understood is that financial stagnation almost never has its root in the methods a person uses to pursue wealth. It has its root in the environment within which they are pursuing it. Specifically, the human environment, the energy field created by the people who have regular, recurring access to the space where your family sleeps and eats and builds its future. The Talmud returns to this teaching in multiple places because the sages considered it among the most practically urgent things a person could understand. The teaching is this: a home has a ruach, a living spirit, a quality of energy that is shaped over time by what enters it, not just what happens inside those walls, not just the prayers said there or the decisions made there, shaped by the types of souls permitted to inhabit that space with regularity. What enters your home repeatedly becomes part of the home's frequency, and that frequency determines whether Shefa, divine overflow, abundance in waiting, can move through your household, or whether it arrives at the edge of your life and is quietly redirected somewhere else. You can pray with full sincerity. You can give tzedakah faithfully. You can act with complete integrity in your business and your dealings, and still watch abundance approach and then pass you, because the channel is clogged not by your behavior, but by the energy frequency that lives in your home through the people you have allowed to settle there. My grandfather, may his memory be a blessing, used to say, "Show me who eats in your kitchen, and I will tell you what grows in your field." He had survived conditions that would have destroyed most men. He had rebuilt twice, and the very first thing he did each time, before he secured housing, before he established any business, was establish who would sit at his table. He called this the first act of construction. Not the walls, not the roof, the table, and who was permitted around it. He had studied under rabbis who watched whole communities rebuild from devastation, and in every case the communities that recovered most fully were the ones most intentional about this single distinction. He placed his hand on our kitchen table one Friday evening when I was 19 years old, and he said, "Everything you will build in this life, Naomi, will be shaped by who you allow to build alongside you. Guard this table like it is the altar, because in our tradition it is." Let me tell you about a man I worked with a number of years ago. I will call him Amir, though that is not his name. He was in his late 40s, a contractor, hardworking in a way that goes beyond the ordinary meaning of that word. This was a man who had poured 11 years into his business, who had built it from nothing with his hands, who kept his word to clients and his people, and never cut a corner. His business generated income, but it would not grow past a certain number. Every time he approached the threshold of a new level, every time a larger contract was within reach, every time momentum built toward a genuine breakthrough, something contracted. A client fell through. An unexpected cost appeared. The progress reversed. He sat across from me with the specific frustration of a person who has been doing everything correctly and cannot understand why the result keeps resetting. I asked him to walk me through a typical week. Who was in his home? Who had regular access to his space? He began describing it. His wife, his children, the occasional friend. And then, about 12 minutes into the conversation, he mentioned his brother. He said his brother came over most Sunday evenings. I asked what those evenings looked like. He paused for a long moment. He said, "My brother talks about everything that is wrong, the economy, the industry, the government, the way things used to be. He has been talking about these same things for as long as I can remember." I asked, "Does anything in what he talks about ever change?" He looked at me. He said, "No, nothing ever changes." I said, "And when he leaves on Sunday night, what do you feel?" He thought about it carefully. He said, "Like something has been taken from me, like I am more tired after he leaves than I was before he arrived." I said, "Because something has been taken from you, and that is the first type. The first type of person the ancient wisdom warns you to guard your home against is what the sages described as the one who has made lament their permanent dwelling place. I call them the mourner of impossibility, and I want to be very precise here because the tradition is precise, and the distinction is everything. A person who is going through something genuinely hard, who has suffered real loss, who is in a real season of difficulty and is working through it. That person brings you something true when they come to your door. You receive them, you sit with them, you support them, and what moves between you is honest and human, and it honors the full weight of the obligation of community. The mourner of impossibility is different in one specific way. For them, the hard season never becomes a season. It is a permanent address. Every conversation is an updated report on everything that is failing: the economy, the market, the neighbors, the times we live in, the fundamental unfairness of everything. And there is never a step being taken toward anything different. There is never movement. There is never a change in what is being said. The report is simply refreshed, weekly, reliably, in your living room, in your kitchen, in the space where your children do their homework and where your household breathes. Here is the mechanism that makes this dangerous, and it comes directly from the Kabbalistic understanding of how Shefa moves through a household. Human beings are not closed systems. We are what the ancient teachers called kelim, vessels, and vessels are shaped not only by what fills them, but by what consistently surrounds them. When the mourner of impossibility enters your home with regularity and broadcasts the frequency of permanent, systemic, irreversible impossibility, they do not intend harm. I want to say that clearly and without equivocation. But intention does not determine impact. Frequency determines impact.
And the frequency of nothing ever changes. Nothing ever works. Nothing will ever be different. Absorbed repeatedly in the space where you are building your financial life, becomes part of the architecture of your belief at a level below conscious awareness. The way moisture moves into a wall long before the stain appears. This is not metaphor dressed as theology. This is mechanism. And the mechanism has a remedy. Guard the threshold. What I told Amir was not to abandon his brother. He loved his brother. The teaching does not ask you to perform emotional amputations. That would make a mockery of everything the tradition says about the sanctity of family. It asks you to become intentional about the container. He began meeting his brother outside the house. Coffee, a walk, a drive. He protected his home as the space where a different frequency lived.
Within approximately 8 weeks, not immediately, not the next morning, 8 weeks, he described a shift in the quality of his home that he struggled to put into rational language. A lightness, a return of something he had not noticed was gone until it came back. And in the 3rd month, his business crossed the revenue threshold it had been approaching for 2 years. One large contract, the first of what became a pattern. I am not telling you that redirecting his brother was the singular cause of that outcome. What I am telling you is that I have watched this specific pattern too many times across too many different lives to call it coincidence. Guard the threshold. The home begins to function differently. This has always been the teaching. The second type is more difficult to see clearly because they come wrapped in the language of relationship, of family, of we take care of our own. And I hold those values. The tradition I have spent my life inside holds them deeply. But there is a specific configuration of those values that has been used, without malice, without full awareness, often with genuine warmth, to create one of the most reliable and least discussed patterns of household wealth drainage I have encountered. The second type is what I call the covenant breaker. In its simplest form, the one who takes and does not return. Not once, in a genuine crisis, with real intention to restore when they can. That is life. That is what community is supposed to do. The covenant breaker is the one for whom taking has become the structure of your connection over time. Money lent and never returned. Counsel given from deep experience, never reciprocated. Connections and introductions offered. Your relationships, your professional trust, consumed without acknowledgement. Favors flowing consistently in one direction, from you outward, with nothing returning. And, this is the detail that matters most, with no apparent awareness that an imbalance exists at all. The ancient teachers identified this as a violation of what they called the Brit HaChilufin, the covenant of exchange, the foundational understanding that all genuine relationship operates on the principle of mutual flow. Not perfectly balanced in every moment, human life is not a ledger, and the tradition never pretended it was, but balanced in orientation, in intention, over time. And when that covenant is consistently broken by someone who inhabits your home, who receives your hospitality, your resources, your counsel, your emotional energy, Something happens in the spiritual mechanics of your household that the sages described with specific and sobering language. Every unreturned gift, every absorbed loss that carries no consequence for the taker, sends a signal into the energy field of the space where you are trying to build wealth. The signal says, what flows into this vessel can be redirected without cost. And the universe, I will use that language carefully because I mean it carefully, patterns itself around what you demonstrate you believe through your actions, not through your prayers, through what you repeatedly allow without naming it and without holding the line. This is the behavior I will challenge directly, continuing to absorb these losses while telling yourself that enduring in silence is the spiritual choice. That is not humility. It is avoidance wearing the clothing of virtue. The ancient teachers were clear that allowing someone to take from you repeatedly, without engaging the truth of what is happening, does not serve that person's growth. It confirms to them at the deepest level of their operating reality that they are exempt from the law of reciprocity. You are not helping them by allowing the pattern to continue. Name the imbalance. Speak it, not with cruelty, but with the clarity the tradition calls emet, truth spoken in the service of shalom. Restore the covenant if it can be restored, and if it cannot, move the person outside the threshold of the space where your family's future is being built. I saved the most important for last, and I want you to hear this one carefully, because this third type causes the most damage and is the least often identified, not because its effect is subtle, but because it arrives dressed so convincingly as love. The third type of person who drains your wealth is the one I call the whisperer of limits. You know this person. You may have known them your entire life. They are not cold toward you. They are warm. They do not want to see you fail. They want to see you safe, stable, protected. They carry for you what they call realism and what they call care. But underneath both of those words, they carry a ceiling. A fixed and intimate sense of what is possible for a person like you, in a life like yours, in a world that works the way they believe it works. And they bring that ceiling into your home every time they visit. Not loudly, not with cruelty, with a specific kind of careful question that sounds almost exactly like wisdom. Are you sure about this? I just worry that the timing isn't right. A lot of people try something like this and it doesn't work out the way they planned. Have you really thought through what happens if it doesn't go the way you're hoping? These words are delivered in your living room, at your kitchen table, in the most sacred space you have, and they arrive at exactly the most dangerous moment, when a new vision is still forming, when a new direction is still fragile, when your faith in what is possible is genuine and real, but not yet strong enough to withstand sustained doubt from someone whose opinion has mattered to you for years. The ancient teachers taught, do not speak of your plans before they are strong enough to survive opposition. I extend that teaching directly and specifically in this direction. Do not speak of your plans inside a home whose atmosphere has been regularly shaped by the frequency of the whisperer of limits. Your home must be the place where vision is safe to exist in its earliest form, young, unproven, not yet armored, not yet fully articulated. Because that earliest form is where everything real begins. And the whisperer of limits does not destroy your vision in one dramatic moment. They do it incrementally. By leaving behind a splinter of doubt after each visit until, months later, at 3 a.m. before the decision that could change everything, you hear a voice inside your own mind that sounds like yours, that asks, but what if they were right? And you cannot trace it back to where it came from. That is the damage. Not what was said in your living room, what you are still carrying inside your own thinking 6 months later, at the moment of decision, when everything that has been building depends on the step you are about to take or refuse to take. Now I want to prepare you for what comes in the days immediately after you begin to apply what you have received today. Because this is where most people who receive this teaching lose it. Not because the teaching is wrong, but because they are not prepared for what comes next. The tradition has a name for it, the Nisayon Hasaf, the test of the threshold. When you begin to guard your home with intention, when you redirect the mourner of impossibility to spaces outside your walls, when you name the imbalance with the covenant breaker and hold the line, when you stop revealing your early vision to the whisperer of limits, something will arrive within the first 2 to 3 weeks that tries with real force to convince you that you have made an error. It will arrive as guilt, a specific guilt that tells you that you are being cold, that you have betrayed the obligations of love and community. Some of those you redirect may name it as rejection. The pressure will be significant. That pressure is the test. I am telling you now so that when it arrives, and it will arrive, you recognize it not as evidence that you were wrong, but as confirmation that you did something real. The Yetzer, the internal force the sages described as the pull toward what is familiar, even when what is familiar is hurting you, does not bother with small changes. It reserves its force for the ones that matter. Stay with the discernment. Give the new frequency of your home 40 days to establish itself. What tends to follow, in my experience guiding people through this transition, is not the loneliness you feared. It is a quality of quiet that slowly becomes generative, a clarity in your financial thinking that was not there before. Small movements at first, an unexpected opportunity, a call from someone you had not heard from in months, a sudden resolution to something that had been sealed for a long time. These are not miracles. They are the first fruits of a field that has been cleared. Welcome them. They are the sign that the channel has begun to open. What I have shared with you today is one piece of the architecture. It is a real piece, and if you hold it and apply it, you will feel a shift. But there is a complete framework, the full ancient map of how a household either channels or blocks abundance, including specific practices, specific arrangements, and specific words the tradition has preserved precisely because they produce results in the material world. If you want the full architecture rather than one wall of the building, the link to access it is in the description below this video. It is for the person who has already decided that something fundamental must change and who is ready to go to the root rather than rearranging the surface. Now I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below, and I am asking for something specific. Tell me which of the 3 types you recognize today. The mourner of impossibility, the covenant breaker, the whisperer of limits. You do not need to share a name. You do not need any detail that does not feel safe to share publicly. Simply tell me which one has had a regular place in your home. Because naming it, in writing here with intention, begins the process of moving it. The ancient teachers knew what every serious practitioner of spiritual life knows. What you can name, you can release. What remains unnamed stays exactly where it is, doing exactly what it has always done. If this teaching reached something real in you today, not just something interesting, but something true in a way you felt in your body, rather than just processed in your mind, subscribe to this channel and press the notification bell, because next week, I'm going to reveal the single most powerful interior morning practice for restoring financial flow to a household that has been spiritually blocked. A practice preserved in the tradition for over 2,000 years that takes less than 4 minutes to perform and requires nothing except your full intention. You do not want to receive that teaching secondhand or late. Subscribe with the bell so it finds you the moment it is released. And if something shifted in you today, even 1 degree, even a question where there was no question before, press the like button. It tells the platform that this wisdom has value, and it places this teaching in front of someone else who is silently sitting inside a home that is draining them. Someone who does not yet have the language for what they are experiencing. Someone for whom what you just watched could be the beginning of everything that finally changes. Your one click carries that possibility. Please do not underestimate what it holds. May your home become what it was always designed to be, a vessel of shefa, of divine overflow, of peace that generates rather than consumes. May every threshold you guard return to you tenfold what the guarding cost you. May the circle around your table be small and sacred, and filled with souls who know with equal beauty how to give and how to receive. May what has been waiting at the edge of your life find at last the open channel it has been looking for. Go forward in wisdom, go forward in peace. Shalom.